What's going on, guys? So in this video I want to talk a little bit about the 77D and kind of my thoughts on it. I bought the camera probably about 2 months ago, pretty much been using it ever since, and I just want to kind of talk a little bit about what I like about it, what I don't like about it, as well as also give you a little bit of my input on what camera I think you should buy if you're considering this one and some others. So let's go ahead and jump on into it. Alright, so let's talk specs for a minute. So this camera is very similar to the 80D. It comes with the 24.2 megapixel CMOS APS-C sensor. It's also got Canon's newest processor, their Digic 7, which I believe they released late last year. The camera also has a 3-inch rotatable touchscreen. Very cool for doing things like vlogging, or if you want to shoot video or stills like way overhead or down below close to the ground. Use this touchscreen all the time, the rotatable aspect of it. Super awesome, love that thing. It also has, for video, up to full HD 1080p at 60 frames per second. And it also has the same autofocusing system as the 80D. Now, if you're not familiar with the 80D, it's got a great autofocusing system. A lot of people really talk about it or really love it. And this camera's got pretty much the exact same system. So if you're shooting through the viewfinder, you have access to a 45-point cross-type phase detect autofocusing system. So when I'm shooting stills, the autofocusing is really quick, really precise. It usually locks on really quickly, really love it. And then for things like video, when you're shooting in live view, you have access to the dual pixel CMOS autofocusing system. Super good. Really awesome system. Compared to my T6i using it on video on the 77D, it's a huge improvement. I really love it. I don't shoot a lot of video, but when I do, it's so much nicer having the super smooth and quick autofocus. Absolutely love this system. And then finally, this thing also has, shoots up to 6 frames per second for stills. Not crazy, but for most people, it's probably good enough. ISO goes up to 51,200. Probably would never shoot that high. I think on this, I'd probably keep it to 6,400 or below. And then last but not least, this camera does have Wi-Fi capability and Bluetooth. So the previous lineup of cameras, the T6i, T6s, they had Wi-Fi capability but not Bluetooth. One downside to that is Wi-Fi really drains the battery on your camera and on your phone, and it'll really heat up your phone pretty good. At least it did mine. So having the Bluetooth capability allows you to have access to a lot of the controls on the camera via Bluetooth. And then if you still want to do things like live view shooting through your phone, or if you want to transfer images, that's when you need to connect to Wi-Fi. But for a lot of things, you can just use Bluetooth now, which is really cool. Really love that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about build quality and feel. So as far as feel goes, it's a great camera. I think all the controls are right where they need to be, but I think generally speaking, Canons are just that way for me. I feel like all the control layouts just map to my brain really well. I just don't have to put a lot of thought into manipulating the controls. If I need to change a setting, my hands just kind of go to where they need to go, the setting's made, and I move on with my life. Build quality is really solid. One thing I will note real quick though is if you're thinking that this camera, because its nomenclature is 7070, which is between a 70 and a 70D and an 80D, would be in the same size class physically, it's really not. This is very much so a small compact DSLR. It is virtually identical in size to the T7i as well as like the T6i and the T6s. It is a smaller compact DSLR, so don't let that name confuse you when it comes to physical size. Smaller DSLR. But other than that, it's still a really solid camera. It feels really good. Everything's right where it needs to be. Yeah, there's a lot of plastic. Yeah, it's not a 5D, but generally speaking, I think it's a really solid piece of gear. Now, some of the things that I don't really like about the camera, really, there aren't that many, to be honest. I'm not just saying that just because I own it. I mean, I really, honestly, it really pretty much has everything I really want as a stills photographer. And then even for the little bit of light video that I do, it works perfectly fine for that. The one criticism that I do have on it would be that I wished you could remap the depth of field preview button. In my opinion, the depth of field preview button is pretty much worthless, so I wish you could remap it to something else, but you can't. And that's the other thing with this camera is you really can't remap very many of the buttons to very many other things. And I wish they would allow you to do that. I'm pretty sure they could. It would just be a firmware update. Like on a 5D, you have so many more options in terms of which buttons you can remap and what you can remap them to. If I had my way, if I had my preference, what I'd like to do is take the depth of field preview button and remap it to be able to quickly change between my autofocus drive mode. Now, for most of the shooting that I do, I'm just in single point autofocus, but every now and again, a situation arises where there's something moving towards me or away from me at some angle very quickly, and in order to get them, sharply in focus when I take the photo, I really should be in continuous autofocus. The only problem is, by the time I navigate through the menu system to get to it, the moment's gone, I've lost it, I missed the shot. So to be able to remap that button, to be able to go from single point autofocus to continuous, just at a single press of a button on the outside of the camera would be so awesome. I would love to have that feature. It's the one thing I can't do on this, and unfortunately it's the one criticism that I really have. But to be honest, it's not huge, and for most people they probably won't even care. So I don't really have a lot of criticisms for this camera, to be honest. I just think it's a solid piece of gear. So anyway, moving on to the next bit, which is, why did I buy this camera? So as I alluded to earlier, I had a T6i previously, and that was a great camera. I really enjoyed using it, but there were a few things that were kind of lacking on it. One of the things that was kind of lacking in my opinion was not having a scroll wheel in the back. Now, I didn't really realize it when I bought the camera, but I didn't realize how much of a pain it would be to change the aperture if you've got big, thick gloves on. Now, I live in Chicago and it gets cold in the winter, and when I'm out shooting in the city, I've got big, thick gloves on because otherwise my hands will freeze. And when you're trying to change the aperture, you've got to hit that little tiny Q button and then roll the wheel on the top. It can just be really hard to do with big, thick gloves. So having an external scroll wheel that allows you to make that change in aperture outside externally is just, it's a really nice feature to have, and it's one of the things I really missed on the T6i. So that was one of my justifications for moving into this camera. Now, another reason why I decided to get the 77D was kind of along the same lines. I really wanted to have an external feature like the rear lock button. T6i didn't have that, and one of the issues that I would run into is I would use a crossbody sling and the camera would be just dangling on my side when I'm not using it, and inevitably the screen would bump into my body, buttons would bump into my body, settings would get changed, the screen would always be on, the battery would drain quicker, and when I'd go to take a shot, there'd be some crazy new setting on my camera and I wouldn't know exactly how to remove it right away. So then I'm just sitting there for 2 or 3 minutes trying to figure out, like, man, what did I do? How did this thing get turned on? And then just trying to figure out how to turn it off and get back to where I was. That was always a pain. So now on the 77D, being able to lock out those switches and let it hang and know that it's not going to drain my battery by having the screen always on or by hitting buttons, it's just a huge lifesaver. I really love having it, and it was another justification for me personally why I wanted to get the 77D. Now finally, the last main reason why I wanted to pick it up is simply because it's the newest camera in that particular model line of Canon's cameras, and so that means the T6i, the T6s, they're going to be decreasing in value pretty much every month from here on out. So I wanted to get rid of that camera as quickly as possible just to maximize my value for it, spend a little bit of money up front, move into this, get the most money I could from a T6i, as well as gain those few extra features that I did really want. So those are kind of my justifications. They may not be the best ones, but they're the ones I used. All right, now, so for the last part of this video, I want to talk a little bit about what camera should you get in my opinion. And again, this whole thing is just gonna be my opinion. You can have yours, you can watch other videos. This is just what I think. So take it with a grain of salt. But anyway, what I think you should do is, if you're considering a T7i or a 77D, if your price point, if you're really struggling to justify even spending the money on a T7i, I would say just go with the T7i. It's a perfectly great camera. You can do pretty much all the same still stuff that you can do with a 77D and an 80D, and the video, I mean, if you're just getting started, it's gonna do you plenty well. So I would say if you're struggling to justify spending the money on even the T7i, just go with that camera. It's gonna do you so well. It's gonna be a great camera to get started with, and it'll be a great investment for you. Go with the T7i. Now, if you've got a couple extra dollars to spend and you can afford a 77D and you're mostly a stills photographer, I say go with the 77D. Having the extra scroll wheel on the back, super nice. Having the lock button, really nice. As well as just a few other things on the 77D, which I think make it a better option overall if you can afford the couple extra $100. Now, as far as who should get the 80D, I think if you're gonna be somebody who's really heavy in the video and video production, the 80D will probably be a better fit for you. Now on the 80D, even though it shoots 1080p, 60 frames per second, which is the same as the 77D, it does it with a different compression algorithm. It uses all-I compression, whereas the 77D and the T7i use IPB. Now, for most people, that probably isn't gonna mean anything and you'll never notice a difference, but if you're somebody who does plan on being very heavily involved in video and the post-production of video, then having that all-I compression might be a benefit to you, and that might be a reason why you wanna move into the 80D as long as you can afford it. And then finally, if you just simply prefer the feel of a larger camera and you have the extra money to burn, then yeah, again, an 80D might be a better option for you. But otherwise, if that doesn't really fit you, if you're not heavily involved in video, I would say just go with the 77D or the T7i. Both excellent cameras. They're going to do really well, especially if you're just getting started. So those are kind of my thoughts. That's my opinion. Take it for what it's worth and go from there. All right, so that's really about it for this video. That's pretty much everything I wanted to cover. Just wanted to give you a quick rundown on specs and what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and maybe a little bit about what I think you should do if you're trying to make a decision between this camera and some others. So if you found the video useful, you got some good information out of it, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you've just got some comments you want to leave below, if you want to let me know if there was something that you wish I would have added in, something that you'd maybe like to see me talk about in a future video, go ahead and leave a comment down below. And then also, this is honestly the first time I've really done a video like this. I've never really done a review video, never done a tech thing like this before. So, if you've got any, critiques for me, if you got anything you think I should have added in the video, again, go ahead and leave a comment down below. I'll look forward to reading them. And then if you want to see more videos like this, I plan on doing a lens review video on some lenses that I bought for the 70D here pretty soon. So if you want to see that video, go ahead and subscribe. And until then, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care and be safe.